Yo, what's up? Welcome back to another episode of the SWUS. It is Wildcard weekend, and as is tradition, we're going to start off in Houston with the Texans home game, 4:30 p.m. Eastern time. The memes have been pretty funny on that. They play at this time every single year. We got Chargers, Texans first, then we got Steelers, Ravens, both games on Saturday. Going to go through both of them in this video. Last year, I had a great NFL playoffs. I went 10-3 against the spread last year, so hopefully we have a repeat of that. I did just lose Penn State last night, +2. Drew Aller, man. I was frustrated at that one. It was a great game, though. But yeah, we got 2 NFL games Saturday. Let's do it.
Welcome to the SWUS. Hey, SWUS. The SWUS. Hey, get the SWUS.
All right, like I said, Chargers are on the road in Houston here. The Texans are catching a flat 3 pretty much across the board, pretty much sitting at -115 across the board, too. But it looks like all those 2.5s are long gone. It was at 2.5 for a little bit this week. If you look at the pie charts, the data seems to be coming in pretty heavily on the Chargers side. Over 70% of the tickets, over 70% of the money. As I always say, take that data with a grain of salt. So let's get into this matchup, and we'll start with the Chargers offense against the Texans defense, and this should be a favorable matchup for Houston on this side of the ball. The Texans defense, 4th in yards per play, 4th in success rate. Chargers offensively, 15th and 20th. I do have to say I'm a little concerned, though. Week 16 and 17, so not last week, the 2 weeks prior to that, Houston's defense looked anything but elite, and those were 2 standalone huge games against big AFC opponents. The defense didn't look good. 29 points per game in those 2, 6.5 yards per play, 57% success rate against the Chiefs and Ravens in those 2 games. And I'm especially concerned about the numbers on the ground in those 2 games. 5.46 yards per carry, over 188 rushing yards per game, success rate per rush over 47%. This is Houston. This is supposed to be a top 5, maybe even top 3 run defense in the NFL. Now, maybe they could get a pass for Baltimore. I mean, it's the Ravens. They could run the ball on anybody. But Kansas City? You can't be getting run on by the Chiefs if one of the backbones of your football team is stopping the run. Can't be getting run on by the Chiefs. So when we look at a graphic like this, look at the Chargers graphic on the right side here. These are the Chargers rushing numbers in the last 3 games. 139.7 rushing yards per game, 4.3 yards per carry, success rate down at 35%. You might look at that graphic and say, Chargers can't go into Houston and run the ball on the Texans. That's the top 5 run defense there. And you'd be right in saying that. That being said, look at the left side of this graphic. Those are the Chiefs' rushing numbers the 3 games before the Houston game. I mean, they were having all kinds of problems trying to run the football in Kansas City, and they were able to run the ball in Houston. Not to mention, the Chargers tend to run a lot of gap concept blocking schemes, 7th most in the NFL. Plays into the weakness of the Texans defense. They're elite against zone runs, but against gap runs, they're 14th in yards per carry allowed, 17th in success rate, closer in the middle of the pack. So maybe the Chargers can run the football on Houston. That being said, look at the injuries, and this is good news if you plan on betting the Texans here. Al-Shaair back from suspension. He actually came back last week. Fatukasi also back from injury. And the reason I'm pointing these 2 out, we just talked about how the Texans got run on by the Chiefs and Ravens in week 16 and 17. Neither of those 2 guys were on the field. Both will be playing in this game, and I know Christian Harris is listed as questionable. He's been practicing all week, so I think Christian Harris is going to play as well. So with those 3 guys on the field, we're talking about the first time this entire season that the Texans have had their starting defensive front 7 all healthy on the field together all season. Because remember, Christian Harris missed the first 11, 12 games with injury. Then he finally came back, and Al-Shaair got suspended around the same time. And also Fatukasi got hurt. So now that all 7 of these guys are healthy, the first time this entire year, we're seeing a healthy defensive front from the Houston Texans. That being said, we do have to mention that the Chargers offense is in pretty good shape as well when it comes to running the football. When it comes to throwing the ball, there are all kinds of injuries to the wide receiver position. But J.K. Dobbins listed as questionable. He's been practicing. I think he's going to play. Gus Edwards is back. He hasn't played in, I think, 3 games. So they're going to have Dobbins and Gus Edwards on the field. It's been a while since they've had both. So both of those guys are going to be active. Also, Pipkins, the right guard, he's listed as questionable, but he's been practicing. I think he's going to play. He's been banged up the last few games as well. He did play in 1.5 of them. But he hasn't been 100%. Looks like he's going to play as well. But is that enough for them to go on the road into Houston, a top 5 run defense, and run the ball on a defensive front that's finally healthy for the first time this season? I would have to say probably not. Chargers should struggle to run the ball in this game. But what about the matchup for Justin Herbert? Let's talk about the roller coaster that is Justin Herbert's season so far this year. If you followed the Chargers this season, you know that week 7 through 11, right there in the middle of the year, it was looking like Justin Herbert was going to be in the MVP talks by the end of the season. That 5-game stretch, he was looking like one of, if not the best quarterback. This was looking like the best passing attack in the NFL. Look at these numbers. Passer rating over 111 over those. I mean, this isn't a game or two. This is a 5-game stretch where Justin Herbert was consistently putting up elite numbers. And how does he follow that up? Well, by struggling for a 4-game stretch there. 6.3 yards per attempt, 195 passing yards per game, an average pass rating down at 88 in weeks 12 through 15, a 4-game stretch. So at that point, we were like, okay, that Justin Herbert elite thing, the Chargers passing attack being unstoppable, that was just a phase. It's over. The Chargers passing attack doesn't look all that great. But then after that, they finish out the season with a 3-game stretch where Justin Herbert and this passing attack looks unstoppable again. It started at halftime of the Denver Broncos game. The Chargers were losing the game. They needed it. It's a big division game. It was a Thursday night football game, actually. I had the Chargers. I remember it vividly. The second half of that game, Justin Herbert came out piecing the Broncos defense up. And since that moment, I mean, they look great. In the last 3 games, over 303 passing yards per game, 8.6 yards per attempt, average pass rating close to 116, over a 76% success rate per dropback. For reference, a 50% success rate per dropback is excellent. 76% is out of this world. So this Chargers passing attack looks all the way back in the last 3 games. So, yeah, I mentioned how the Chargers are probably going to struggle to run the ball here. This Chargers passing attack is coming into this game with some momentum. They're matched up against a Houston Texans defense that's been running a lot of zone coverage recently. Weeks 1 through 9, just 64% of their defensive snaps were in zone coverage. Since week 10, over 73%. So they've been running significantly more zone coverage recently, 8th most in the NFL in that span. The reason I'm bringing that up, Justin Herbert has been significantly better against zone coverage. In fact, his numbers against man coverage are pretty ugly this season. 32nd in completion percentage, 29th in yards per attempt, 20th in passer rating. Against zone coverage, 15th, 7th, and 3rd. He's 3rd in the NFL in passer rating against zone coverage. So the fact that Houston's been running a lot of zone coverage recently, definitely good news if you plan on betting the Chargers. On that note, if you're looking for a prop to throw down in this game, maybe look at Quentin Johnston. He's been significantly better against zone coverage. He's been basically useless against man coverage this year, just 94 yards receiving on the entire season against man coverage. But against zone coverage, Justin Herbert has a 141 passer rating when targeting Quentin Johnston against zone coverage. So the fact that Houston's been running more zone coverage recently, maybe look towards Quentin Johnston. He's also been getting a lot more looks lately now Ladd McConkey missed a couple of these games. But in the last 5 games, 9 targets a game, over 6 receptions a game, 69 receiving yards per game. In the previous 5, you can see the numbers are way lower than that. As you all probably know, I'm not much of a prop guy, but his receiving yards line is sitting at 43.5, maybe a Quentin Johnston over. Anyway, let's continue with the matchup for Justin Herbert, and so far it's looking pretty good. He's coming into this one on a heater, right? Houston's been running zone coverage. He's been great against zone coverage, but now we have to talk about the Texans pass rush, and this is where we run into a little bit of problems. This is what you're worried about if you're betting the Chargers here. Houston, we just talked about how their defensive front is healthy, how they're elite. Well, they pressure the passer. They don't just stop the run. They pressure the passer. They're 5th in pressure rate, 11th in pass rush grade, 3rd in adjusted sack rate. Now, credit to the Chargers offensive line. They've been pretty solid in pass protection this year, 9th and 7th. 22nd in adjusted sack rate, though. The reason for that is Justin Herbert has had a tendency to hold on to the football a little too long. You can see when given a clean pocket, he's one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. And under pressure, he's not that bad. I mean, a little bit of a drop-off in production, but still 12th in yards per attempt, 12th in pass rating, 21st in turnover-worthy play rate when pressured. But look at the bottom left of this graphic. 21.6% pressure to sack rate, 30th in the NFL. Against a Houston Texans pass rush that's 3rd in adjusted sack rate. So although I do like the matchup for Justin Herbert, I feel it would be irresponsible to not include Texans are probably going to be able to get Herbert to the ground at least a couple times in this game. Remember, this is a Texans pass defense that's been much better at home. We've been talking about this all year. On the road, they're allowing over 245 passing yards per game, 7.1 yards per attempt, average opponent pass rating of 97.9. At home, just 193 passing yards per game, 6.4 yards per attempt. Pass rating drops to 78. They've been much better against the pass at home. That being said, I mean, their last few home games, Lamar Jackson did whatever he wanted, both on the ground and through the air. Also, we saw Will Levis cook this Texans defense up in Houston. So I don't know if this Houston pass defense at home thing, I don't know if that's still alive, because 2 of their last 3 home games, they look really bad against the pass. They did shut down Tua against the Dolphins, but Will Levis and Lamar Jackson both had big games on the road in Houston recently. As a whole, on this side of the ball, I would have to say the Texans defense should be in pretty good shape to give the Chargers some problems here. I think they're able to stop the Chargers from running the ball. Justin Herbert, when he gets clean pockets, should be able to complete some passes. As we pointed out before, the Houston secondary is not healthy. It hasn't been healthy. So when Justin Herbert has clean pockets, he should be able to complete some passes against Houston's zone coverage, but Houston's going to get some pressure on them, and when they do, they should be able to record some sacks, which are drive killers. So as a whole, I think the Chargers offense should struggle. They should be able to get the ball in the end zone a couple times, though. But what about the matchup on the other side of the ball? We got the Chargers defense against the Houston offense, and this is where the Chargers have the considerable edge. Chargers defensively, 9th in yards per play allowed, 7th in success rate. Houston offensively, 21st and 31st. So yeah, considerable edge for the Chargers on this side of the ball. We all know what the story has been with this Texans offense so far this year. It's been a disappointing season, and on top of that, it's been trending in the wrong direction. It seems to be getting worse. In weeks 1 through 8, they were averaging 23.5 points per game as a team, 6 yards per play, 43.8% success rate. That's not quite as explosive as we saw last year, but that's not that bad. That's around the time that Steph Diggs got hurt, and since week 9 without Diggs on the field, points per game is down to 20.1. Yards per play is down to 5.7. Success rate is down to 40.4%. So not only has Houston had a pretty disappointing season offensively, but I mean, it seems to be trending in the wrong direction. Specifically, the second half of the season, not pretty for this Texans offense. And look at the passing production. I mean, falling off a cliff here. Again, weeks 1 through 8, it was a little bit of a step back from what we were expecting. I mean, considering what he did during his rookie season, CJ Stroud. But still, it wasn't that bad. Since week 9, though, I mean, an average pass rating of 76.7 in the second half of the season. This is in a 2-game stretch. That's concerning. 6.6 yards per attempt. I mean, success rate per dropback is still up over 48%, which is good. But as a whole, the second half of the year, this has not been a good passing attack here at Houston. And to make matters even worse for C.J. Stroud, the Chargers run a lot of zone coverage and a lot of too-high safety looks, 77.7% zone coverage frequency, 4th most in the NFL. They're 3rd in too-high frequency. The reason I'm bringing this up, C.J. Stroud has been straight up terrible against zone coverage. I'll use the word terrible. It's been that bad. Against zone coverage this year, he's 38th in completion percentage, 27th in yards per attempt, 39th in pass rating, 31st in turnover-worthy throw rate. He has really struggled against zone coverage so far this year. And on top of that, look at his numbers against too-high safety looks here. 32nd in completion percentage, 26th in yards per attempt, 30th in pass rating, 24th in big-time throw rate, 19th in turnover-worthy play rate. So C.J. Stroud, ugly numbers against zone coverage, ugly numbers against too-high safeties. It's exactly what the Chargers defense does. Now, the good news for Houston is the Chargers secondary is definitely going to be thin in this game. It looks like Taylor is not going to play. He's been pretty good for them this year. So it looks like Taylor's going to miss this game. They also have a couple injuries to the depth. Their 3rd and 4th safeties, Marcus May is out. What's the other guy's name? Can't think of the other guy's name, but their 3rd and 4th safeties, both who see the field, are both out. So the Chargers secondary as a whole is definitely going to be thin. I think Perryman's going to play. While we're on this graphic, he's listed as questionable. He's been practicing. I think Perryman's going to play. But the Chargers secondary is definitely going to be a little bit thin. That being said, we're talking about the Houston Texans passing attack. I mean, thin is the perfect word to describe them. They've been thin all year. No Diggs, no Tank Dell. This is not new. John Mechie's even banged up and listed as questionable for this game, although I do think he's going to play. So, I mean, do the Houston Texans even have the receiving weapons to exploit a thin secondary? I mean, I would have to say no is the answer to that question. Also, Shaq Mason at right guard is going to miss this game as well. He's been ruled out. And speaking of the Houston offensive line, I mean, this is where it gets ugly for the Texans. As I'm sure you probably already know, if you followed football this year, the Texans' offensive line play has been pretty terrible this season, and we're talking about their pass protection here, specifically keeping C.J. Stroud clean, could be a problem. 29th in the NFL in pressure rate allowed, 19th in pass blocking grade, 26th in adjusted sack rate. Now, you may look at the right side of this graphic and say, Kyle, the Chargers are only 27th in pressure rate, though, which is true. They are 27th in the NFL in pressure rate, but check this out. Since week 15, the Chargers averaged 2.24 seconds to pressure. 2.24 seconds. That's 1st in the NFL. They're generating pressure at the quickest rate in the NFL since week 15. 31st in pressure rate in that span. What does that tell us? Well, it tells us that offenses are giving the Chargers pass rush the Pittsburgh Steelers treatment, which means they come into this game planning to get the ball out of their quarterback's hands fast. Get the ball. They come in with an offensive game plan, get the ball out of your quarterback's hands in 2 seconds or less, because that Chargers pass rush is coming. First in seconds to pressure since week 15, but 31st in pressure rate. And that could be a serious problem for CJ Stroud. Not that his numbers under pressure are bad. In fact, he's been pretty good handling pressure so far this year. 19th in yards per attempt, 19th in passer rating, first in turnover-worthy play rate. But just like Justin Herbert, he has a tendency to hold on to the football. He's bottom 5 in the NFL in seconds to throw, and it results in taking sacks. Bottom left of this graphic, 22.1% pressure to sack rate, 32nd in the NFL. This Chargers pass rush gets to the quarterback fast. They get the quarterback to the ground. CJ Stroud tends to hold on to the football. Not a good recipe. And that's actually concerning in a couple of different ways here. So the Chargers defense has been susceptible to the downfield throws this year. 21st in DVOA against the deep pass. They've been much better against the shorter throws. Normally, that would be a positive thing for CJ Stroud, because we know CJ Stroud likes to throw the ball downfield. 11.7% of his pass attempts this season have been considered deep passes. So this should be a positive thing for CJ Stroud. But considering the Chargers pass rush is getting to the quarterback at an average of 2.24 seconds, fastest in the NFL since week 15, how are these downfield routes even going to develop here in this game for CJ Stroud? Not to mention, look at the passer rating. Yeah, he's thrown the ball downfield a lot this year. He's got a 57.7 passer rating when he does. So he hasn't been nearly as efficient throwing those deep balls as he was last year. I don't like that. I mean, this should be a good matchup for CJ Stroud. He should have opportunities to make big plays on the Chargers secondary, but considering they're getting to the quarterback at an average of 2.24 seconds, the Texans offensive line sucks, and CJ Stroud tends to hold on to the ball, I don't like it. I don't like it at all. And CJ Stroud is not good throwing the ball underneath. He's not very efficient throwing those short passes, so this worries me for CJ Stroud. On top of that, this is a road game for the Chargers, and if you follow the Chargers this year, you know they play much better defense on the road. On the season, they're allowing just 13.9 points per game in the road games. 13.9. 5.2 yards per play, compared to at home, 6.6 yards per play, 22 points per game. They're allowing 8 more points per game in their home games than they are on the road. They're allowing less than 2 touchdowns a game in their road game so far this year. Look specifically at their numbers against the pass on the road. 5.8 yards per pass attempt, 73.2 average opponent pass rating in their road games, 191 passing yards allowed per game. For whatever reason, this Chargers defense just locks down on the road. Their numbers against the run are also better on the road, 33.7% success rate per rush, 103 rushing yards allowed per game. But I do have to say, if you're looking to bet Houston, when it comes to running the football, you might be able to find a little bit of value on Houston, but in my opinion, not much. In the last 5 games, they are averaging 5.3 yards per carry as a team, but I mean, we're still talking about under 108 rushing yards per game. 31.6% success rate per rush is terrible. And this is a Chargers defense, yes. They're allowing 5 yards per carry in their last 5 games, but success rate down at 37%, indicating they still have been strong against the run. So maybe Houston is able to run the ball a little bit on the Chargers, but I'd have to say probably not, especially if Perryman plays at linebacker, which it looks like he's going to. I would say probably not. As a whole on this side of the ball, I have to say I do not like the matchup for the Houston offense. I think CJ Stroud is going to be under all kinds of pressure. Houston can try to run the ball. It's going to be tough. Yeah, I don't know how much production we can expect out of the Texans offense here, which is why when it comes to betting this game, I have to lean towards the Chargers. I mean, the move was to get the Chargers at 2.5 earlier in the week. Unfortunately, I did not get that. I do have some CLV on my other NFL bets this weekend, but this game I don't have a bet on right now. If you put a gun to my head and force me to place a bet, I would probably take that minus 125 Houston team total under 20.5. I think the angle I like most is the Chargers defense against the Texans offense. So I'd probably say give me that Houston team total under 20.5. I definitely lean towards the Chargers -3, but I got to say I'm definitely worried. We're talking about a low total here, 42.5. This very well could be a 21-20 game, 19-17, 20-19. I mean, this very well could be a 1 or 2 point game where that -3 could hurt. So I'm not trying to lay a full 3 on the road in a game I expect to be low scoring and defensive. So I think my favorite, I'll probably end up betting Houston team total under 20.5, maybe Chargers -3, but I don't think there's any value on the Chargers at laying the full 3. In fact, kind of don't like it. So give me the Houston team total under 20.5. Quick update. So after recording that, I actually did throw a few dollars down on the Chargers at -3. I got a -102. So I took the Texans team total over and the Chargers -3. Probably not a good bet. The Chargers -3. I mean, the move was to get it at 2.5 early in the week, and I didn't. So missed the number, but maybe just doing a little bit of gambling on that one. I do like that Houston team total under though. Next game. Sticking in the AFC, we got Pittsburgh on the road in Baltimore. The Ravens are now laying 9.5 across the board. Total down at 43.5 across the board. Let's take a look at the pie charts, and according to the data, we're looking pretty split here. Tickets coming in about 55% of the tickets on Baltimore. Money's coming in 50-50. So action's coming in pretty split on this one. But as I always say, take this data with a grain of salt. So let's get into this matchup. We're going to start with some trends. There's a lot of them here. We're talking about Steelers-Ravens. There's a lot of history between these two teams. Number one, it has been profitable to fade both of these teams in the playoffs. Steelers 2-7-1 against the spread in their last 10 playoff games, 1-3-1 against the spread in their last 5 as underdogs. Baltimore 1-3 both straight up and against the spread in their last 4 home playoff games. So if you've been blindly fading both of these teams in the playoffs, you're doing pretty well. Now, what about head-to-head? As you know, Pittsburgh has gotten the better of Baltimore. They're 6-2 straight up, 6-2 against the spread in their last 8 against the Ravens, and specifically their trips to Baltimore also 6-2 straight up and 6-2 against the spread. So the Steelers have played well here on the road in Baltimore. Also, as I'm sure many of you know, anyone who subscribes to this channel probably know because we've been talking about it for 2 years, this has been an under series. In the last 9 matchups between the Ravens and Steelers, they are 1-8 to the under. Actually, it was 8 in a row. The last game went over. That was the first over between Baltimore and Pittsburgh in like 4 or 5 years. So this has been an under series. If you've been blindly betting the Steelers and the under every time these two teams play, you're doing pretty well here. That being said, just a few weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, week 16 in Baltimore, the exact opposite happened. Ravens won that game 31-17. Baltimore covers, it goes over. So all the trends I just said, none of that happened in week 16. It was Ravens and over all the way in that one. But we're not interested in the past. We're interested in this matchup right here. So let's start with the Steelers offense against the Ravens defense. And obviously, Baltimore has the considerable edge on this side of the football. They're 5th in yards per play, 2nd in success rate. The Steelers offense has been, it's been a mess for most of the season. There were a couple bright spots in there, but they're 25th in yards per play, 26th in success rate. So just raw data on the season, we know Baltimore has the considerable edge on the defensive side of the ball here. And on top of that, these two units are just trending in complete opposite directions here. You might remember, beginning of the season, Baltimore was having some problems on the defensive side of the ball, allowing 25.3 points per game, 6.4 yards per play. That was in weeks 1 through 10. Pretty much the entire first half of the season, the Ravens defense, specifically against the pass, was looking pretty vulnerable. But since week 11, they've been locked down. This has looked like one of the best defenses in the NFL, allowing just 15.4 points per game, 5.1 yards per play. So the Ravens defense playing their best football right now. And as far as the Steelers offense goes, it's kind of the complete opposite here. In week 7 through 13, that's when Russell Wilson was getting going. Him and Pickens were connecting, 28.7 points per game, 6.4 yards per play. But since week 14, 16.8 points per game and 5.2 yards per play. Yes, Pickens did miss, I believe, 3 of those games, but even when he came back, it hasn't looked all that great. Steelers offense definitely seems to be trending in the wrong direction. So will Pittsburgh's offense be able to turn things around here on the road in Baltimore? They're looking to run the ball. I know we all think of Russell Wilson and George Pickens, Freiermuth. That's who we think of when we think of the Steelers offense. But this is an Arthur Smith offense. They're looking to run the football. They're 4th in rushing frequency on the season. Going to be tough to generate some push against this Baltimore defensive front. Steelers offensive line, they've been pretty terrible in pass protection, but in terms of creating space in the run, they haven't been all that bad. 16th in adjusted line yards, 9th in run blocking grade, 25th in yards before contact, but Baltimore 12th, 4th, and 6th. So Baltimore should have the edge here on the line of scrimmage. Now, one thing you can point at here if you're trying to back the Steelers run game, a lot of zone blocking. They're 2nd in the NFL in zone run frequency. Actually plays into the weakness of the Ravens defense. Not that they're bad against zone runs, but they're definitely better against gap concept blocking schemes. Against zone runs, 5th in yards per carry allowed, 17th in success rate. Against gap, 3rd and 8th. So, okay, there's something if you're looking to back the Steelers run game here. The problem is they've seen Baltimore twice already, and they weren't really able to run the ball in either game. Now, I know you might look at this graphic, 4.3 yards per carry, 120.5 rushing yards per game. That's not bad, and it isn't. Look at the success rate. Under 30% success rate per rush. So the Steelers really weren't very successful trying to run the ball in this Ravens defense in the past. Not to mention, this Ravens defensive front seems to have gotten their shit together ever since the Saquon Barkley game. Week 13, the Eagles had 142 yards on the ground, 45.2% success rate per rush, almost 4.6 yards per carry as a team. In the 3 games since then, which includes one of their games against the Steelers, just 77 rushing yards allowed per game, success rate under 27%, 3.85 yards per carry. So ever since the Eagles game, maybe a bit of a wake-up call for this Ravens defensive front. They've been locked down against the run in their last 3 games, and they're completely healthy here, both in the front 7 and the secondary. The Ravens defense, in terms of the 11 starters, completely ready to roll here. And you know what? You can say the same thing on the Steelers side. They're still missing those 2 offensive linemen, but that's not new. These 2 guys have been out basically the entire season. So both sides pretty much completely healthy here in terms of the Steelers offense against the Ravens defense. Do I think the Steelers are going to be able to run the ball against Baltimore? Probably not, but I do think Arthur Smith is a creative guy, and maybe a little bit. Maybe they're able to move the chains a little bit. As a whole, they shouldn't be able to consistently run the ball in Baltimore, though. Now, let's talk about the matchup for Russell Wilson next. Will the Steelers be able to throw the ball in this game? Well, the narrative, I should say, what we were all talking about, and myself included, they need Pickens back, right? The passing game just disappeared, and we were all like, they need George Pickens back. He's such a huge part of what they're trying to do. Russell Wilson likes to throw the ball downfield. He mostly throws it to Pickens. With him not out there, the Steelers' offense isn't the same. Here's the thing. Pickens came back, and they're still struggling. 176.5 passing yards per game, 5.2 yards per attempt, average pass rating of 72, 52.8% success rate per dropback actually is pretty solid, but Pickens has been back for 2 games, and it hasn't looked all that great. One of those games against Kansas City, elite defense, okay, maybe we give them a little bit of a pass, but Cincinnati, in a game they needed, why weren't they able to throw the ball on the Bengals defense? They've been getting cooked by every single starting quarterback they've seen. That's inexcusable. I believe George Pickens dropped 3 passes in that game as well. Doesn't give me a ton of confidence here in the Steelers passing attack. And like I said before, this Ravens defense against the pass, they figured their shit out. Since week 11, 5.8 yards per pass attempt, 74 average opponent pass rating, 188.9 passing yards allowed per game. They've been great against the pass. So the whole Ravens secondary is vulnerable. They can't stop the pass. That's been dead for about 2-3 months now. Now, here's where it gets interesting, because on paper, this actually looks like it might be a good matchup for Russell Wilson. Baltimore, since week 11, they started playing much better defense, week 11, right? Since week 11, they've been running a lot more cover 1. 21.5% frequency in weeks 1 through 10, 32.8% frequency since week 11, 5th most in the NFL. They've also been running a lot of single high safety looks. Obviously, that goes congruent with cover 1, 60.6% since week 11, 7th most in the NFL. Why am I bringing this up? Well, that plays directly into the strength of Russell Wilson. He's been excellent against cover 1 this year, 15th in completion percentage, 4th in yards per attempt, 7th in pass rating against cover 1, and he's also been a top 10 quarterback all year against single high safeties. 9th in yards per attempt, 8th in pass rating, 1st in big time throw rate, 5th in turnover-worthy play rate. He's been great against cover 1. He's been great against single high safety looks. And also, what does Russell Wilson love to do, especially when George Pickens is active? Throw the ball downfield. 13.1% of Russell Wilson's pass attempts this season are considered deep passes. And look at the passer rating, 114.8. Russell Wilson loves throwing the ball deep, and he's very efficient doing it. Plays into the weakness of this Ravens defense. Even though they've shored things up, they are susceptible to the deep ball. And the matchup actually gets even better than that for Russell Wilson, because Baltimore doesn't have the best pass rush. They're not a bad pass rush. They're pretty average. I think they're like 14th in time to pressure since week 10. Pretty middle of the pack. Russell Wilson, one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL this year when given a clean pocket. 11th in yards per pass attempt, 13th in passer rating, 4th in turnover-worthy play rate. So he may have some clean pockets to throw from too. This is looking like a great matchup for Russell Wilson. We should go take the plus 9.5 right now. Here's where the matchup gets scary for Russell Wilson. We just pointed out that Baltimore doesn't have the best pass rush, which is a positive because Russell Wilson is a beast from a clean pocket. Here's the problem. Despite Baltimore not having the best pass rush, I still don't think Pittsburgh is able to keep Russell Wilson safe in the pocket. Week 16 against this same Ravens defense, Russell Wilson was pressured on 44.7% of his dropbacks, the 6th most pressured quarterback in the NFL this week. And in fact, since week 11, he's been one of the most pressured quarterbacks in the league. 38.6% of his dropbacks he's been pressured on since week 11, 7th most. So even against the Baltimore pass rush that isn't that elite, I still don't think the Steelers' offensive line can keep Russell Wilson clean in the pocket. And also, Baltimore doesn't blitz a lot. This is not a team that blitzes at a high rate, which is bad. The reason I'm mentioning that is Russell Wilson's one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL when blitzed. 11th in completion percentage, 3rd in yards per attempt, 5th in passer rating, 1st in turnover-worthy throw rate when blitzed. When not blitzed, 41st, 30th, and 29th. How do you beat Russell Wilson? You put pressure on him, you abuse that bad Steelers offensive line, and sit back and you still drop 7 in coverage. That's how you give Russell Wilson problems. That's what Baltimore's probably going to be able to do here. So as a whole on this side of the ball, as I'm sure a lot of people would agree, this is going to be a tough spot for the Steelers offensively. I mean, they're not playing their best football at all. This offense has looked pretty bad for a while now. Ravens defense has been on fire. They're playing their best football of the year right now. So on paper, this should be a very tough matchup for the Steelers offense. I will say George Pickens coming off the game where he dropped 3 passes. I think we can count on Russell Wilson to connect on a deep ball or two. I think George Pickens will make a big play or two. So I don't think the Steelers will get shut out or anything. I do think they'll find their way into the end zone 1 or 2 times maybe. But as a whole, it's going to be tough for the Steelers to consistently move the chains in this game. But what about the matchup on the other side? We got the Ravens offense against the Steelers defense, and Baltimore has the edge on this side, obviously, but it's not nearly as much of a blowout as the other side of the ball. Baltimore 1st in yards per play, 2nd in success rate. Pittsburgh's defense 14th and 20th. If you're a Steelers fan or you plan on backing Pittsburgh in this game, you definitely like the defensive performance you saw last week against Cincinnati. That was a big game. The Bengals needed that game. It's one of the best offenses in the NFL. Held them to 19 points, 5.2 yards per play. I know they lost that game, but that was not on the defense. The defense played really well. The Steelers offense played like absolute shit, but the Steelers defense showed up. It was a good defensive effort. So if you're backing the Steelers or you're a Steelers fan, you definitely like what you saw against the Cincinnati Bengals last week. Now, Baltimore has been able to run the ball on the Steelers this year. Their 2 games against Pittsburgh, 6.6 yards per carry as a team. 174 rushing yards per game, success rate over 52% per rush. So the Ravens have not had problems running the ball in the Steelers this year. One of those was just a few weeks ago as well. That being said, I do want to give the Steelers defense a little bit of credit. Other than that Week 16 game against the Ravens, if you look at Weeks 15, 17, and 18, so the 3 games sandwiching that Ravens game, they're actually playing great defense against the run. One of those games was against Philadelphia, Kansas City, Cincinnati. 3 top 10 offenses there. Now, I know the Chiefs and Bengals don't have dynamic rushing attacks. It's really just the Eagles. But those 3 offenses, 3.4 yards per carry, 90 rushing yards per game. So the Steelers defense as a whole is playing much better against the run. There was just that one game against Baltimore. So I know a lot of people are looking at this matchup, right? They're looking at the first 2 games between these 2 teams. Baltimore was able to run the ball in the Steelers in both games. They're looking at the full season numbers. Baltimore, one of the best rushing attacks in the NFL. Steelers numbers against the run aren't all that great. They're thinking there's no way the Steelers defense is able to stop Baltimore from running the football in this game. I actually think they are able to limit it a little bit. Keep in mind, this Steelers defense is completely healthy. Coming into this one at full strength, this is a Mike Tomlin defense. They're not going to get bullied in a playoff game by their division rivals. Do I think they're going to shut the Ravens' run game down? No, absolutely not. No one can. But I do think they're able to keep the Ravens from just gashing them on the ground for 5-6 yards per carry. I think the Steelers are going to put up a fight up front. I think they're able to keep the Ravens from crushing them on the ground, which means if the Ravens are going to cover a big number like 9.5, Lamar Jackson is going to have to play his ass off, and this is Lamar Jackson against the Steelers. There's a history here. The question we have to ask, is this trend broken? Because last game he played well against the Steelers. Over 65% completions, 9 yards per attempt, 3 touchdowns, a pick, a 115.4 passer rating. Played great against the Steelers. Why is this significant? It was the first good game he's had against the Steelers in his entire career. Look at the numbers from his first 5 starts against the Steelers. 56.7% completions, 6.5 yards per attempt, 5 touchdowns, 8 picks, an average passer rating of 66. He's been terrible against the Steelers over the course of his career, and this is the reason why right here. What do we know about Lamar Jackson? Loves to hold on to the football. 2.84 seconds to throw. 3rd longest in the NFL. So only 2 quarterbacks. It's actually Jalen Hurts and Sam Darnold hold on to the football longer than Lamar Jackson does. Obviously, that's going to be a problem when you play the Pittsburgh Steelers, who are top 5 in this category basically every single year. 2.44 seconds to pressure, 6th fastest in the NFL. Lamar Jackson holds on to the ball 2.84 seconds. The Steelers pass rush arrives at the quarterback 2.44 seconds. 0.4 of a second difference there. The Steelers pass rush is getting there on average quicker than Lamar Jackson is throwing the football. Now, it's not like Lamar Jackson has had problems handling pressure this year. In fact, he's been excellent under pressure, but you give Lamar Jackson a clean pocket, that's where we're seeing the MVP stuff. First in yards per pass attempt, first in pass rating, fourth in turnover-worthy play rate. When pressured, the yards per attempt drops from 9.8 to 6.6. Pass rating drops from 131 to 94. The point I'm making is the Steelers pass rush gets to the quarterback quickly and Lamar Jackson holds on to the football. By no means was I saying Lamar Jackson can't handle pressure. So that's why he has problems with the Steelers. I should say that's why he's had problems with the Steelers over the course of his career. And Lamar Jackson didn't look all that great against Cleveland's pass rush last week. 7 yards per attempt, 217 yards in the game. And that was a meaningful game, by the way. Baltimore needed that. They kept him in there for most of the game. They actually dropped him back to pass a lot. I know that because I took Lamar Jackson under 207.5 passing yards. It lost on the very last pass. Lamar Jackson was struggling, especially in the first half, to throw the ball against that Cleveland pass rush. So right now you're probably thinking, all right, so Lamar Jackson has struggled against the Steelers. Maybe they're able to give him some problems. And yeah, I can get with the fact that the Steelers aren't going to get bullied around on the defensive front. The Ravens aren't going to average 6 yards per carry. I can get with that, but the talent gap is just too big. This Ravens offense is too good, and I get that. But there's still a couple things we need to mention here. Number one, no Zay Flowers in this game. He's been ruled out by far. Lamar Jackson's most important receiving target, although Mark Andrews is playing some better football as of late. No Zay Flowers in this game. That's definitely going to hurt for this Ravens offense. And number two, I hate to bring this up. Ravens fans are going to hate this, but we need to talk about Lamar Jackson's history in the playoffs. If you followed the NFL for more than 6 months, you know he hasn't played well. The narrative with Lamar Jackson for years has been best quarterback in the NFL during the regular season, can't play in the playoffs. I'm just saying what the narrative is. I'm not saying that. We do have to point out the numbers. In 6 career playoff starts, he's completing 57.4% of his passes, 6 touchdowns, 6 interceptions, an average pass rating of 75.7, taking an average of 4.3 sacks per game. Lamar Jackson has not played well in the playoffs over the course of his career. Even the game last year against Houston where they won comfortably, he threw for 152 yards, I think it was, in the game. He did rush for 100. I'm not going to pretend like he played poorly, but he didn't throw the ball all that well, and that's in the playoff game he won. So Lamar Jackson in the playoffs laying a big number, I have to lean towards the other way, even though I don't know where the offense is going to come from on a consistency level for Pittsburgh. I'm hoping the Steelers are able to connect on a big play or two. So why don't we talk about the bets? I actually nailed this one in terms of the market. Who knows if the bets actually win, but in terms of timing the market, I nailed it. I have 2 bets on this game. I got the under at 46.5. It's currently sitting at 43.5, so I crushed that one. And I also got the Steelers at 10. So the 2 bets that I personally have open, under 46.5, Steelers plus 10. I do personally think those are the right sides to be on. Obviously, at the current numbers, don't like them as much. But I do think the Steelers defense is going to show us their best fastball here. I think Lamar Jackson is going to struggle. I think the Ravens might even struggle to get the run going. So give them the Steelers plus the points. I doubt Pittsburgh wins this game, but I do think they can cover plus 10. So Steelers plus the points and the under. We'll talk about it on the live show. That's going to be at 10:30 a.m. Eastern time, but we're doing college basketball first. We're going to do the NFL second. So if you're just coming for the NFL, probably tune in around 11:15, somewhere in there. That's when we'll be talking about the NFL. If you want to see all the bets I personally have open, head over to KyleKirms.com and click on Open Bets. You'll see all mine as well as everyone else on the staff here. Let's have ourselves a great playoffs. Let's get it started. Please remember to bet responsibly. Hit me up in the Discord if you need me.